He said, yes, he did think I did better, but he had like another critique for me. And then he stood up and he said he was going to come down and tell it to me personally because it was going to make me blush. He said, when a man and a woman start to get close, what does that lead to? Kissing, foreplay, and then that leads to sex.
Meet Judge Bruce Morrow of the Wayne County, Michigan Circuit Court. He thought his black robe gave him license to say whatever he wanted, and he was mostly right. Except when he wasn't. During a tense murder trial in 2019, he sat down next to two young female prosecutors comparing jury selection to foreplay, cause-of-death testimony to an orgasm, and each of their heights, weights, and muscle masses. That bothered Anna enough to tell her big boss right away. It bothered Ashley too, though Ashley didn't want to say anything, especially during the trial. You'll hear from both. Turns out when you're a pig, it's really hard to keep your black robe clean. Let's warn us.
Between June 10th and June 13th of 2019, the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office was prosecuting a serious homicide case. This was a stressful, high-stakes case because it is likely that Matthews was a serial murderer. The case was assigned to Judge Bruce Morrow. The prosecutors on the case were two females. Ashley Chaffone was 33 years old at the time and had been a prosecutor for about 7 years. Ms. Chaffone had participated in a trial almost 10 years earlier when she was an intern as second chair before Judge Morrow. But other than that, she had no prior relationship with Judge Morrow until the Matthews case. So by June of 2019, how long had you been a prosecutor?
A year and a half about.
And in June of 2019, may I ask how old you were?
27.
Before your involvement in the James Matthews case, did you know a man by the name of Judge Bruce Morrow?
I had heard of him. I had never been before him.
Now, did anyone point out to you that you start the sentences that way?
Yes. On this occasion, during this trial, Judge Morrow had let me know after the evidence tech, he told me that is something I should keep an eye on because I was starting a lot of my sentences with and.
Was it okay with you that he told you that?
Yes.
And were you offended that Judge Morrow said that to you in open court?
No.
Did you appreciate his feedback?
Yes. I tried to work on it with the next witness, but I did.
And do you know where Ms. Chaffone went during the break?
To the bathroom.
Where did you go during the break?
I didn't go anywhere. I stayed in my seat.
How crowded was it behind the prosecution table?
It was very crowded. It's, in like a normal folding table, but when there's 3 chairs, the armrests are like right up against each other. It gets kind of hard to move.
Right. So you said you were seated in the middle chair?
Yes.
And Ms. Bickerstaff, you said left the courtroom. Who was seated?
Ms. Chaffone left the courtroom.
I'm sorry, Ms. Chaffone, correct. Who was seated to your left?
The OIC Sergeant Griffin.
During the break, did he stay in the chair or did he leave?
He stayed in his chair.
Did anything unusual happen during that break?
When we were on that break, I had addressed the court, Judge Morrow, and I had asked, trying to keep in mind the tip you gave me. I tried to, heed your advice. Did you think I did better?
And what were you referring to?
When he told me I was starting every sentence with "and," I tried to keep in mind to not start every sentence with "and" during the medical examiner.
So you were asking him if you did better in that regard?
Yes.
Where were you when you asked the question?
Seated at the prosecution table or, headed to sit down at the prosecution back in my seat at the prosecution table.
Where was Judge Morrow when you asked the question?
He was up sitting on the bench.
Did he respond to your question?
Yes.
What did he say?
He said, yes, he did think I did better, but he had like another critique for me. And then he stood up and he said he was going to come down and tell it to me personally because it was going to make me blush.
At that time, did you have any idea what it was that he was going to say to you?
No.
When he made that statement, did he say it loud enough for everyone in the courtroom to hear it?
Yes, he said it loudly, and he said it kind of like continuously as he was coming down, that what he had to say was going to make me blush.
Where did he go when he came down?
He sat on the prosecution chair to my right.
Whose seat had that been previously?
Ashley Chavon's.
At that point, did you have any idea what the conversation was going to be about?
No.
How did he start the conversation?
He said, when a man and a woman start to get close, what does that lead to? And I said, I don't understand, Judge. And he repeated it again. He said, when a man and a woman get close, what does that lead to? And I said, do you mean sex? And he said, yes, it leads to sex. He said, you start with holding hands, rubbing elbows, kissing, foreplay, and then that leads to sex. And then he said, would you want foreplay before or after sex? And I didn't say anything. When he asked about foreplay, I didn't respond, but he just kept looking at me until so he said, would you want foreplay before or after sex? I didn't say anything. And then he repeated himself, so I responded.
And what did you say?
I said before.
Tell us how his body was positioned when he talked to you like that.
He was like kind of turned towards me and like leaning forward a little bit, like stretching like his body towards me, not like he wasn't addressing the whole court room.
Can you estimate how close your heads were together?
Probably like a foot and a half. The chairs were very close together.
What were his eyes doing?
He was looking directly at me, wasn't breaking eye contact, wasn't looking around, just constant eye contact through the conversation. I felt very uncomfortable. It's not a conversation I, would feel comfortable having with a judge or really anyone I work with. I felt like very frozen, like I couldn't leave because he's a judge. I couldn't just get up and walk away from him. It's not perfect. I mean, none of this was very professional, but I was always taught not to disrespect the judge, not to, walk away or be rude, that if they're going to give you criticism or something like that, or if they're going to, I guess give a critique, like even if it's harsh, you just sit and take it and then say, thank you, Judge, at the end. So I didn't feel like I was in a position to do anything. I felt just kind of trapped there and frozen and very uncomfortable and embarrassed about the conversation.
Did you want to end the conversation?
Yes, I didn't want to have that conversation. Yes, after he asked about foreplay, he then asked me, so would you want to ask the manner of death and the cause of death first or last? And I said first, which was wrong. And he said, no, you want to build up the testimony. You have the testimony of the medical examiner. You want to tease the jury with the details of the report. And that leads to the climax, which is the cause and manner of death. He said it would make no sense to do it first. And he said the testimony crescendos into the cause and manner of death. And that's all that really matters with the medical examiner's testimony.
While he said those things to you, what were his eyes doing?
The same thing. It was just direct eye contact with me.
Could you describe for us the tone or loudness or softness of Judge Morrow's voice while he had that conversation with you?
It wasn't real loud. Like he was only speaking to me. He wasn't, like projecting to the whole courtroom, I guess.
Did he keep his voice low?
Yes. Yes, he didn't, try to include anyone else in the conversation or anything.
Did there come a time when Ms. Chavon returned to the courtroom?
Yes.
Were you still talking to Judge Morrow at the time she returned to the courtroom?
Yes, and I believe as she was kind of approaching the prosecution table, that was when the judge got up and returned back to the bench.
Did you tell Ms. Chavon anything about what had just occurred?
Yes.
Did you tell her everything or just some of it?
Some of it.
Why did you at that point not tell her everything?
We were getting ready to pick back up. There wasn't really time.
Eventually, did you continue on the record with the trial?
Yes.
Did Judge Morrow ever apologize to you for the way he talked to you?
No.
Did you ever ask him for an apology?
No.
What is the reason you didn't ask him for an apology?
I don't think that would have been appropriate. He's a judge. I was a 1-year prosecutor at that point. I wouldn't have thought that was appropriate to do.
Did there come a time when Judge Morrow invited you into chambers?
Yes, later that day.
Would it have been before the lunch hour or after the lunch hour, if you know?
After the lunch hour, I believe.
Who did he invite into chambers?
Myself and Ashley Chavone and Mr. Noakes.
Did the three of you then go into chambers?
Yes. It was more just like the judge was giving us his opinion, kind of like a lecture. It wasn't really like a conversation, then actually saying how he didn't believe that the evidence we put in was relevant at all. And he kept asking, well, like, why would you do that? You didn't prove anything that wasn't helpful to you. And then Ashley would try to jump in and kind of defend herself as to why she did what she did in the trial. He said that he initially was talking about the DNA. Ashley tried to defend herself, and then he kind of like cut her off and said, all you did was show they effed.
All right, now here you're allowed to say that word, so please say it.
Oh, okay. He said, all you did was show they fucked. You showed they fucked. That's all they did. Like, you didn't prove anything else.
Did he say the word fucked twice?
He said it a couple times. Yes, at least twice.
Now, have you ever been in a conversation with a judge before where he used that word?
I don't believe so.
Did he discuss with Ms. Chavone anything about her voir dire?
Yes.
Tell us what he said about her voir dire.
He said that he doesn't normally give attorneys time to do voir dire, but he'll give them time if he thinks he can learn something new from them. And he said he didn't learn anything from Ashley. He said that her example was too complicated, and she overcomplicated it, and that we didn't end up learning anything about the jury that we needed to know.
Did he give you a proposed voir dire that he would have given the jury had he been the prosecutor in the case?
Yes.
Do you recall what he said as his example?
Yes, he said, if I want to sleep with a woman on a first date, I wouldn't say, do you want a family? I would say, would you sleep with me on a first date? Have you ever slept with anyone before on a first date?
Did you think it was appropriate or inappropriate for him to give you that example?
I thought it was very inappropriate.
Okay. And did he say anything else in chambers besides using the F word and that you thought was inappropriate?
He made comments about the defendant's body parts.
What specific body part?
His penis.
Okay. Did he refer to the defendant's penis as anything other than a penis?
He did not use the word penis. He said dick.
What was he saying about the defendant's dick?
He was saying, oh, that guy must think he feels so good about himself or something like that his dick was big enough to hurt her, hurt the baby. He must feel so good about himself that he has such a big dick. Yeah, right, my guy, or something like that.
Did you want to leave that conversation?
Definitely.
Is there a reason you didn't get up and walk out?
I thought it would have been unprofessional to just walk away from a judge while he was speaking to us. Just get up and leave in the middle of the conversation.
Who was the first person you told?
Brad Cobb and Dave Champagne and Laura Narcessian were there, and we had told them what had just happened, and Dave Champagne said that was totally inappropriate. We needed to go tell a supervisor. And as he had...
Wait, let me interrupt you for a minute. Those two people that you've named, Dave Champagne and Laura Narcessian, are they prosecutors?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
As Dave had said that, my supervisor, Bob Donaldson, was walking from the far end of the hallway, and I saw him and I was like, Bob, I need to speak with you. So then we went into my office and he took us to appeals, to Jason Williams, who's the chief of the appeals division. He took us to Jason.
Did you have any reluctance in reporting this to the people you worked with and the supervisors you worked with?
I did not.
Did there ever come a time when you were asked to review a report that Judge Bivens submitted to Kim Worthy, the elected prosecutor?
Yes.
When you reviewed that report, did you review the paragraph relating to your interview with Joanne Kinney?
Yes.
Did you see any errors in what she had written?
It says she added that she felt Judge Morrow was trying to hit on her because of what he stated regarding sex and foreplay. I didn't think he was hitting on me. I didn't say I thought he was hitting on me.
On direct examination, you told disciplinary counsel that Judge Morrow said he wanted to give you a piece of advice that was going to make you blush. Do you remember that testimony?
Yes.
Isn't it true that Judge Morrow told you that he'd like to give you a piece of advice that might make you blush?
I don't recall if he used the word might.
It's very possible, as you sit here today, that he said might rather than was, correct?
I don't recall.
So if Joseph Curley heard the word might, you would not call him a liar, right?
I don't think he would be lying.
It's fair to say you did not leave your seat at any time during the conversation with Judge Morrow.
Correct.
You did not nudge or ask Sergeant Griffin to get off his phone or do whatever while you were engaged in the conversation with Judge Morrow.
I did not.
You did not make any gesture to signal to Judge Morrow that he should stop talking, correct?
I did not make any gestures.
Your chair, as we've seen in the pictures, had wheels on it, correct?
Correct.
While the person next to you was very close in the chair and the tables in front of you, there was room to go back towards the bench that is behind the prosecution table and chairs, correct?
Correct.
You did not slide your chair backwards towards the bench, correct?
Correct.
Do you remember that Ms. Chiffone was there sitting on the bench behind the table and chairs at the very end of the conversation?
I do not recall that.
You do remember, this is the memo, page 2, lines 4 and 5. You do remember that you did have time and did, in fact, tell Ms. Chiffone before the case began again that the judge had given you advice on how to question the medical examiner.
I did have time to tell her that, yes.
And those are your words that you chose to describe the conversation that you had had with Judge Morrow during this 5-minute break, correct?
Correct.
Did you ever tell anyone that Judge Morrow was hitting on you during that conversation?
No.
At any time, did you ever allege to anybody that Judge Morrow was hitting on you?
Never.
Now, do you know what legal trouble Bill Cosby got into?
Yes.
Do you know whether Judge Morrow had a picture of Bill Cosby on his wall after Bill Cosby got convicted?
I believe it was after that is when I saw the picture, yes.
And did you think it was appropriate for a sitting judge who tries sexual assault cases to have a picture of Bill Cosby on his wall?
No, that's why I remembered it.
Is there a reason you didn't try to stop him from approaching your table?
I didn't think I needed to. I didn't think it would have been appropriate.
Were you assigned to a special unit in the prosecutor's office?
I was.
What unit was that?
The homicide unit?
Before your involvement in the homicide unit, did you know Judge Morrow?
Yes, just from having worked at the building, I had done actually my first jury trial in front of him as an intern. And then I had a couple of cases pending in front of him at the time.
What is the name of the case you were trying in front of Judge Morrow in June of 2019?
People versus James Matthews.
And was that a homicide?
Yes, it was a cold case from 2003 in which the allegations were that the defendant had murdered a woman that was a known prostitute drug user. There was evidence that the body had been drugged from a house associated with the defendant down the porch and left at the front lawn of that residence.
Did the case involve any sort of sexual activity?
There was a rape kit done in and there was some evidence of DNA with regards to possible sexual encounter. Anna Bickerstaff was second chairing at the time.
And was she a more junior prosecutor than you?
Yes, very much so.
Did you have an officer in charge?
We did.
What was his name?
Sergeant Derek Griffin, excuse me.
And do you know from what department he was?
Detroit Police Homicide.
Before the trial started, you said you had some limited contact with Judge Morrow. Is that right?
Yes.
Did you have any sort of personal relationship with him or friendship?
I wouldn't say that, no.
During your pretrial matters and the prior cases that you've had in front of Judge Morrow, how did you and he get along?
Well.
Okay, no problem at all?
No, professional.
During the trial, how did you and Judge Morrow get along?
I would say that we got along fine. It seemed as though it seemed as though something had changed.
And what made you conclude that?
His attitude towards me, I would say.
Describe what his attitude was like.
He seemed less patient, I would say, potentially, and seemed very critical.
Why did you ask him for feedback?
I do that with most of my cases that I do. I'll talk to the judge. I'll ask the judge in advance for feedback after the case isn't resolved, just to kind of figure out what I can do better, how I could improve. And
did Judge Morrow, was he willing to give you feedback?
I wasn't certain based on the conversation. I had approached the bench or the kind of the clerk's area in front of the bench, and I had asked if at the end of trial, at the conclusion of the case, if he could give us, meaning myself and Ms. Bickerstaff, some feedback or some tips about things we could have improved on or things of that nature.
And what did he say to you?
He said that I wasn't tough enough for feedback. And I responded back and I said, I'm tough enough, Judge. And he said, you're not tough enough for feedback. And then he directed the question to Ms. Bickerstaff. And he said, Ms. Bickerstaff, do you think that she's tough enough for feedback? And Ms. Bickerstaff responded, and she said, yes, Judge, I think she's pretty tough. And he said, I don't know. And I said, Judge, is it going to be like really ruthless? And he shrugged his shoulders and said, maybe. And I said, are you going to say I'm like the worst prosecutor you had in your courtroom? And he just shrugged his shoulders. And I said, well, I would still appreciate the feedback. And that was the end of the conversation. And I thought at that point that he wasn't going to give any feedback. When I returned into the courtroom, I saw Judge Morrow seated in the seat that I was sitting in at the prosecutor's table, and he was seated very close to Ms. Bickerstaff. The two chairs were touching, and they were both making eye contact with one another, talking very closely.
Have you ever seen a judge during a trial come down and sit at the prosecutor's table and talk to a prosecutor without the defense attorney being present?
No. So I sat down in there's a bench right behind where the prosecutor and the defense table is. I heard Judge Morrow say that the cause and manner of death are like the climax.
At that time, did you have any idea what he meant by that?
No, I had no idea. At some point, the judge got up and walked back up to the bench, and Ms. Bickerstaff stood up. And I asked her, what was that all about?
You can't tell us what she said, but just answer this. Did she tell you anything about what it was all about?
Yes.
And was there a time when Judge Morrow invited you all into chambers?
Yes. The jury had been deliberating because I know that when we left his chambers that day, it was to release the jury.
So when Judge Morrow invited people into chambers, who did he invite?
He didn't say by name. He said, come with me, little ones. And it was myself, Ms. Bickerstaff, and Mr. Noakes.
How long were you in his chambers?
2 hours, probably.
Who did most of the talking during the conversation?
The judge and I.
What was Ms. Bickerstaff doing?
Nothing.
What was Mr. Noakes doing?
Not much of anything either.
What were you and the judge talking about?
It started as he wanted to show me a court rule, or show Mr. Noakes and I had indicated a court rule. And then, in my opinion, it turned into a critique of how we put in the case, we being the prosecution.
Okay. So let me go back. During the trial, did Mr. Noakes make a motion for directed verdict?
He did.
Did Judge Morrow rule on the defense motion?
He did not. He said he was holding his ruling in abeyance.
When you went into chambers and you said he was talking about the law, did he present to you a different rule?
Yes, he said to me when we got into chambers that he called us back there because he didn't want to dog me in front of other people because he thought I would be embarrassed that I had misstated the rule.
What does it mean to dog someone?
Criticize or critique or...
All right, now, before that, had he criticized or critiqued you or dogged you in the courtroom?
Yes.
But on this occasion, he said he didn't want to embarrass you.
Yes.
Did he show you a rule of law or a court rule?
Yes, when we walked in there, he, being Judge Morrow, had 2 books open. He handed one to Mr. Noakes, and he handed one to me. And both of the books were opened to the same court rule, which was a Michigan court rule regarding directed verdicts of acquittal, I think.
And what does that rule say?
Essentially, it says that the judge has discretion to hold a directed verdict motion in abeyance and to issue his ruling at any time, even after the jury had rendered its verdict. And so then the judge had asked, like, do you know what that means? And I was kind of looking at it. He goes, that means I can dismiss your case at any time.
How did that make you feel?
Concerned.
Why were you concerned?
I felt as though, based on what occurred later on in the conversation, I felt as though I had to still convince him of our case. So it was an old case, and the defendant was alleged to have not only committed this homicide, but to be linked to somewhere in the range of 10 other potential either murder, rapes, or murder, strangulation. All of my cases are very serious to me because they're all homicides. After the motion for a directed verdict, the judge then brought up the issue of the DNA. For most of the 2 hours that we were in the chambers, the conversation was directed towards me, and it was between Judge Morrow and I. Initially, the conversation started with the DNA. The judge had said to me that he did not think that I should have put in the DNA, that the defendant wasn't charged with criminal sexual conduct, and so that it wasn't relevant, and that not only did I struggle my way through the testimony of the lab experts, but that it wasn't helpful. And so then at that point, there was an exchange between he and I. I had responded back to try and, I guess you could say, maybe convince him that the DNA was significant. And I had said to him at that point that, he had said, why did you put in that DNA evidence? It didn't matter. And my response back was, I thought that it was significant that there was DNA was identified as the defendant because it showed that they had close recent contact near in time to the homicide.
Did Judge Morrow disagree with you?
Yes, absolutely. It went back and forth. And I could tell as the conversation continued on, he was getting more and more frustrated with me. And so at a point, he said, do you want me to say what it was really?
Yes, you're allowed to say the word, yes.
Okay. So he had said, all it shows is that they fucked. That's all it shows, that they fucked.
Did he say the word fucked twice?
Yes.
Have you ever had a judge say that word in front of you before?
Not unless they were repeating testimony or no, not in that context, no.
Did you think it was an appropriate thing for a judge to say to an assistant prosecutor? What else did you and Judge Morrow discuss in chambers?
I had brought up some statements or some information that came out during the trial from the testimony of the defendant regarding the defendant's characterization of whether or not he had intercourse with the victim. We had written interview statements from the defendant where initially he indicated that he didn't know this woman, that she was nobody to him, and that the two had not had intercourse because she was a stranger. And he ultimately testified that this was the love of his life and etc. And so when I had said to the judge, one of my points was that the defendant denied that the two had intercourse.
Did you and Judge Morrow then have a discussion about what non-traditional sex was?
Yes.
Tell us how that transpired.
So the judge had asked me what my definition of non-traditional sex was, and I said not intercourse. And the judge had said that my interpretation of non-traditional sex was shaped or formed by my own bias and inexperience. And he had said that what the defendant in his mind had meant by non-traditional sex was just not missionary, not in the typical like way. And then he went on to kind of say he meant like, doggy style, and then he like named some other stuff.
Did Judge Morrow use the words doggy style?
Yes.
Did you feel that that was an appropriate conversation in light of what the subject matter you were talking about?
At that point, I don't know that at the point in time that this was happening, I hadn't thought about whether it was appropriate or not, truthfully. At that point, my focus was like just trying to convince him that the DNA was significant.
With hindsight, do you think that his conduct, his words were appropriate and respectful and courteous to you?
No.
Explain to us why you feel that way.
Because it felt like, not just at that point in time specifically, but during the course of what felt like a very long time in his chambers, what turned out to be around 2 hours, it felt like every example that he gave always kept going back to sex or the way someone looked. It felt like they all kept every example or teaching moment he maybe tried to have about anything always went back to a sexual explanation. With regards to the positions and the non-traditional sex, there was also at the end of that, the judge had kind of said, I had responded back to what he had said about like the positions and whatnot. And I said, well, Judge, actually the defendant says in his statement that he couldn't penetrate her because she could have a miscarriage. And so then the judge at that point kind of like laughed and said, oh, so like what he said, like he's saying that like what he's working with or something along those lines was so big that it would cause a miscarriage. And I said, like, I don't know.
What was he referring to when he said what he was working with?
The defendant's penis.
Did Judge Morrow refer to his penis as any other word besides a penis?
I'm not certain, but it was the sentiment, yes.
Did he ever use the word dick?
He may have.
Your Honor, that's leading.
Objection is sustained.
Do you have in front of you a affidavit that you wrote as well as a memorandum of law that you wrote?
Yes.
Could you review it and tell us whether or not you wrote that Judge Morrow referred to it as a dick?
I'm going to object. There's no basis for that.
Your Honor, it's to refresh her recollection. She said she doesn't remember.
That she couldn't remember.
So she can use her notes and her affidavit to refresh her memory.
Again, she can refresh her memory when she says she can't remember.
Ms. Weingarten, do you have an additional question? Would you rephrase your question, please?
Okay, Ms. Chaffone, do you remember whether or not Judge Morrow used the word dick referring to Mr. Matthews' penis?
I don't remember.
Do you know whether or not you wrote anything about that in your affidavit or in your memorandum?
I did.
Would it help if you refreshed your memory by reading those documents?
Yes.
Okay, Judge, could she have a moment to look at those?
Certainly.
The words I used were he claimed that what he was working with would cause a miscarriage.
And you interpreted that to mean his penis?
Yes, he may have used another word, but the sentiment was, regardless of the word, was penis.
Was the conversation about causing a miscarriage done in a professional manner, or was it made fun of?
It didn't seem professional, no.
Why not?
Because the whole tone of everything that had gone on back there, in my opinion, in chambers, did not, in hindsight, it was not professional.
Did you also discuss, or did you and he discuss your voir dire?
Yes. So Judge Morrow had said that he was not above learning from attorneys, that he still had things to learn, and that he doesn't normally allow prosecutors or defense attorneys to do voir dire because it can be pretty useless, he had said, but that he let us do it on this occasion. And he said, and you know what, Mr. Chaffone? And I said, what? He goes, I didn't learn anything from your voir dire at all. You know, for example, and then he gave an example. He goes, if I want to have sex with someone on a first date, what do I ask them? and no one in the room responded. And he said, I would ask them, have you ever had sex on a first date? And he said, what's the second question I would ask them? And no one said anything. He said, I'd ask, would you have sex with me on a first date? No one responded. He goes, you don't ask questions like, do you want to get married or do you want to have kids? Like those things would come later, right? He's like, so just ask the question you want to know.
How did the conversation in chambers end?
The jury had to be released for the day.
Where did you go after you left the chambers?
Back out front, back to the prosecutor table, or standing next to the prosecutor table, starting to get meaning myself and Ms. Bickerstaff's stuff together.
Did you have another discussion with Judge Morrow that same afternoon?
Very shortly after we walked out of, right after we walked out of chambers and got back over to the prosecutor table.
Where was the jury at this time?
They were still in the witness room, or in the jury room, I'm sorry.
So when Judge Morrow had another conversation with you, was it in the courtroom?
Yes.
Where were you standing?
I was standing next to Ms. Bickerstaff. We were both standing near the prosecutor table.
And what were you doing?
We were just getting packed up for the day. And Judge Morrow had walked through to where we were onto the main floor. He walked up to kind of where we both were, and he asked how tall I was. What are you, about 5'1", 5'2"? And I said, no, but I accept that, Judge. And Ms. Bickerstaff responded and said, well, Judge, I'm 5'3" for context. And so then the judge looked back over at me and said, so 4'10". And I said, well, 4'11" and a half. And he said, and what do you weigh, 105 pounds? And I said, Judge, you're not supposed to ask a girl her weight. And he looked at Ms. Bickerstaff and he said, what are you, 117? And she said, that's very generous, but no, Judge. And he goes, well, I haven't assessed you for muscle mass yet.
When he did that, how far was he standing from the two of you?
A couple of feet.
Was he doing anything with his eyes?
Kind of looking up and down to, I think, assess.
Up and down where?
Us.
Was he looking at your faces or something else?
No, just our bodies, I would say, ourselves.
Did you feel he was eyeing your body?
Honestly, at that point, I just wanted to get out of there. I just wanted to felt like at that point that I just had reached my max with it. And at that point, I didn't want to, I guess you could say, play along and laugh along with him. I just wanted to leave.
When you were in chambers, did you feel like you were laughing along and playing along with him?
Yes.
What was the reason you feel that you had to play along with him?
Because I felt like he would dismiss our case if I didn't.
Now, in chambers, did you want to leave the conversation?
Yes, but I
did
knew
you ever? Wait, I'm sorry, say that again?
I said yes, but I knew that we couldn't.
Why couldn't you?
So you always have a choice. You always can, but it sometimes doesn't feel like you can just get up and walk out.
Did you want to stay and talk to Judge Morrow in chambers?
At that point, no.
If you had been at your office or at a bar and someone was talking to you that way, what would you have done?
Walked away.
Is there a reason you didn't walk away from Judge Morrow?
Because I don't know if I've ever walked away from a judge.
How did that discussion end?
About the height and the weight stuff?
Yeah. Yes.
The jury came out. They knocked on the door and they came out.
Were they excused for the day?
Yes. But after that conversation, we being myself and Ms. Bickerstaff, got in the elevator to go upstairs. Anna, on the way up the elevator, had wanted to tell a boss about what had happened in chambers. And
how did you feel about reporting it?
I told her no. I told her not to tell anyone. I told her that the trial was almost done, that we needed to just keep it to ourselves and just keep going and just get through it. So I was worried about my case. I was worried that nobody would believe us. I was worried what impact that this would have on my career, on Anna's career, that these types of things can follow you your whole entire life, and that you can end up being associated with things like this forever. I was worried what people at Frank Murphy would think of me. I was worried that it was going to become gossip because it's a very small place to work. I was worried that defense attorneys and would look at me differently, was worried that no judges would ever want to take me into chambers again to give me feedback. I had a million things that I was worried about, and I just didn't want her to ever tell anyone.
Did Ms. Bickerstaff seem to have the same reservations about telling people that you had?
No.
Were you present when she told people what happened in chambers?
Yes.
Did you express to Ms. Bickerstaff that you did not want her to tell anyone?
Multiple times.
How do you feel about the fact that she made the decision to tell everyone?
I completely understand why she did that. I was embarrassed with my own way that I handled this. And I think she did the right thing. Something that I was not brave enough to do.
Now, the next day, did you go back to the courtroom?
Yes.
Was that the day the jury rendered its verdict?
Yes.
What was the verdict?
A hung jury.
Was a mistrial declared?
Yes.
And was the case set for a new trial date?
Yes.
Who is Athena?
Athena Syringas was the head of the chief of special prosecution. So she was like the boss.
Okay. How did you feel about Pat telling you had to share this with Athena Syringas?
I knew at that point, if we told like Athena and all of that everything that I was worried about was going to happen.
So did you argue with your boss, Pat Muscat?
Yes.
And eventually, did he concede and let you go into the courtroom the next day?
I don't even know if he conceded. I, at the time, was like insubordinate, I guess you could say. And I said I was going in no matter what, that they couldn't keep me out of the courtroom tomorrow.
Now, after it was all over with, did anybody ask you to put into writing what occurred?
Yes.
Who asked you that?
Athena Syringas.
And she's, you said, the big boss of the Special Prosecutions Unit?
Yes.
So what did you put into writing?
A summary of what had occurred and what my knowledge of what had occurred with Anna and the judge in the courtroom, and then just a summary of the event.
Was it in memorandum form?
Yes.
And do you have a copy of it in front of you? And for the record, it's marked Exhibit 7.
Yes, I do.
And what did you do with the memo once you wrote it?
We gave it to Athena.
Do you know what was done with it after you gave it to Ms. Syringas?
We had addressed it to Daryl Carson.
Who is Daryl Carson?
Daryl Carson is the chief of staff at the prosecutor's office. And my understanding was that Ms. Syringas was going to be forwarding on the memo to Ms. Carson, who eventually may forward it on to Prosecutor Worthy.
Did anyone tell you what you should say in this memo?
No.
Is everything you put in the memo the truth?
Yes.
Did you also write an affidavit?
Yes.
Did Ms. Bickerstaff read your affidavit?
Not that I'm aware of. I don't know, though.
Did the two of you ever talk about what you should put in either your memos or your affidavits?
No.
At any time were you allowed to review whatever she wrote or had about your interview with her?
Called into her office, Anna and I, and indicated that she had finished the investigation, that she had drafted a summary of our interviews, and she wanted us to check the accuracy of them.
Did Ms. Kinney get it right?
For the most part, yes.
Have you been privy to reading the rest of the investigation done by the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office?
No.
Did you read the paragraph relating to Ms. Bickerstaff's interview with Joanne Kinney?
I didn't read it, but I don't remember if Joanne Kinney read them out loud. All I know is that when we walked out, Anna said that there was a mistake in hers.
Did you give her any advice about what to do about the mistake?
I said she needed to go back and she needed to tell Joanne.
Did anyone push you into filling out that form?
No.
Did you understand that was a form that was to go to the Judicial Tenure Commission?
Yes, but I don't know that I understood what would happen after that was submitted.
Did you want to report this to the Judicial Tenure Commission?
I don't know how to answer. So no, in the sense that I didn't want to report it. But yes, in the sense that I knew what happened was wrong. Yes.
Do you believe that you are super sensitive to sexual innuendo?
No.
Do you believe you're super sensitive to men looking at your body and guessing your height and weight?
No.
Do you have any history of having been a victim of sexual assault?
No,
Have you ever falsely made a complaint of sexual assault against anyone?
no,
Have you ever misinterpreted comments made by others that were not meant to be sexual?
I can't think of an occasion.
Do you get offended easily?
No, I would say no.
Have other male judges ruled against you on cases and motions that you've had?
Yes, lots of times.
Have you ever complained about being sexually harassed by any of those judges that ruled against you?
No.
Judge, I have no other questions of this witness.
Did you feel any obligation to speak to any of your superiors in order to make sure Anna Bickerstaff did the right thing and corrected the false report?
Sir, I was trying to just get through it myself, to be quite honest with you. So no, I did not.
So you were willing to let false information go on so long as it didn't have any more impact on you?
No, what I'm saying to you is that Anna is an adult. She's also an attorney. If I give her a piece of advice, which is go back and fix whatever the situation is, I am not her caretaker. So after that point, when I have made my suggestion to her, I kept going. To be quite honest with you, I was going through a lot of stuff on my own with my own situation with this whole case. So making sure and following up with Anna that she followed through on things she was supposed to do on her end, no, I did not.
Did your situation with this whole case include the fact that your superiors were questioning why you had a hung jury as opposed to a guilty verdict?
No, my bosses were extraordinarily supportive and are extraordinarily supportive on cases in this unit, whether or not you get a guilty verdict, a hung jury, or otherwise.
You have told your story now in writing. You have told your story in a memo and in an affidavit. You came in here and you testified. I haven't heard you say once, except for this circumstance here on showing you this rule, that Judge Morrow ever, for a second time or again, threatened to dismiss the case in any way, shape, or form. Am I right that other than showing you this rule and your interpretation of what he was doing, he never said, I will dismiss this because you're arguing with me, for example?
He said, I could dismiss your case at any time.
Right, he said that once, right?
In chambers, yes.
But that's what you focused on, right?
That's what I got out of that initial portion, yes.
Oh, and you said that's what made you stay in that room, right? It was the fear that he was going to dismiss your case if you got up and walked out.
That was one of the things.
The commission unanimously recommends that this court publicly censure and suspend Judge Morrow for 12 months. And in addition, the commission concluded that respondents' mistreating of the two women, as found, was due to gender. The judge's actions and language constituted sexual harassment of these two female attorneys. I would simply point out that this was not an isolated incident, and Judge Morrow is not new to this disciplinary process. He has been admonished by the commission on more than one occasion, including an earlier admonishment that cautioned him against engaging in conversations which are of a personal or intimate nature and which may be regarded as offensive or embarrassing. Now, around the same time, the state court administrator conducted his own investigation and expressed concerns about Judge Morrow's pattern of conduct and informed him that he needed to discontinue this pattern of conduct. Now, in addition to the warning and the admonishments, Judge Morrow was publicly censured by this court and suspended without pay for a 60-day period, dealing with 10 counts of a complaint brought by the commission, dealing with 10 different situations. In that case, the court found that the evidence, and I'm quoting, paints a portrait of a judicial officer who is unable to separate the authority of the judicial office he holds from his personal convictions. Now, the history of discipline in the current case before you illustrates that Judge Morrow is incapable or or at worst, unwilling to conform his judicial conduct and abide by the court rules and the canons of judicial conduct, we must require of our judicial officers. The severe sanction recommended is necessary to restore and maintain the dignity and impartiality of the judiciary and protect the public. The judiciary in this state must know that the misconduct by Judge Morrow against these two female attorneys cannot and will not be tolerated. But if it had been a witness that he had this discussion with, anyone else that came into that courtroom, I think you deal with the same kind of approach and the same kind of consideration. I think you have to look at the entire picture, including the history of the judge, what they've been disciplined for or not before, whether they're remorseful. I think all those things are appropriate considerations, and those are the kind of things that separate Judge Morrow in this case, in my opinion. I think at the end of the day, we're dealing with a power situation here, a power of the position, a power of the robe, and abuse of that power. And because of that, I think a substantial and severe sanction is appropriate, as the commission has recommended. I think public censure is appropriate. And again, suspension for 12 months without pay is the recommendation of the commission. Sadly, Judge Morrow has shown absolutely no remorse for what he has done. In fact, he has doubled down and claims he did nothing wrong. So far, 10 individuals, the master and the 9 commissioners, disagree with his judgment. He blames the victim. He blames Ms. Bickerstaff and called her a liar. The master concluded otherwise, as did the commission. In view of these facts and the history, how can we expect anything else in the future?
10 out of 10 JTC members recommended a year suspension, but the Michigan Supreme Court ruled Judge Morrow would only face a 6-month unpaid suspension. For those of you who say judges look out for their own, you may be onto something. At any rate, Bruce Morrow is no longer a judge. 18 days after his suspension was announced in January 2022, Morrow resigned. The only thing he'll judge now is a low-class beauty pageant. Nobody wants a twice-censured, twice-suspended, washed-up judge who idolizes Bill Cosby and everything he stood for, deciding cases.